The battle between the Galactic Republic and Confederacy of Independent Systems was one that had been conducted by Chancellor Palpatine, otherwise known as the secret Sith Lord Darth Sidious, and both sides were at his mercy. In particular, the Separatist Council, headed by his apprentice Count Dooku, believed that Sidious would protect them from all of the rigours of the war, but they were gravely mistaken. Following the death of Count Dooku at the hands of Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker, the Separatist Council were now under the leadership of the commander of the Droid Army General Grievous, and the cyborg directed them to the lava planet of Mustafar, where they would remain for the last days of the war. The fall of Grievous created a chain of events that led to their demise, as Sidious's replacement apprentice Darth Vader was dispatched to destroy the Separatists after the execution of Order 66, in which most of the Jedi had been wiped out by their own clone troopers. The new Sith entered the war room in their mining complex, and the Council do not know what is happening, and one by one they began to fall, still having delusions of the peace granted by Sidious. But what if the Separatists had managed to evade the wrath of Vader, then eventually join the Rebel Alliance? Would the two sides be able to cooperate to defeat the new Empire? As you will see, the survival of the Separatists would have made for a different outcome. On the lava planet of Mustafar, the Separatist Council watched as the holographic figure of Lord Sidious faded into darkness. Immediately, uproar broke amongst the leaders, as it was obvious that he had sentenced them to death through Vader. Worried that they would endure the same fate as most of the Jedi Order, the group take the Master Control signal, then leave the room in the mining area as the starfighter of Vader landed on a nearby platform, and they begin their sprint to the old Black Sun fortress. To their relief, several ships still remained, and they vanished off of Mustafar to safety for the moment. As Vader leapt from his ship, he was keen to add more blood onto his blade, and he sprinted to the mining facility, but as he arrived, he was disgusted to find that it was empty. Activating the central holoprojector, Sidious was equally displeased at their escape and their continued control over the droid army, but they would soon be purged by his new empire. Without the time spent killing the Separatists, Vader left the planet before Padmé had arrived, and the Senator of Naboo and the hidden Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi were horrified to find Anakin had departed, but from behind a cliff face, R2-D2 rose with his rocket boosters. Padmé asks the droid for the location of Anakin, but R2 only knows that Anakin had left the planet. Obi-Wan quietly communicated with Bail Organa in one of the ship's hidden compartments, and the Senator instructed for a return to Coruscant as Yoda was battling Sidious. Suddenly, the door to his small hideaway slides open, and there stood a furious Padmé. The Senator would have fired at Obi-Wan had it not been for Organa asking for her to go back to Coruscant and give birth in the safety of his cruiser. Padmé hastily goes back to the controls of the ship, and Obi-Wan meditated for the journey, worried about Yoda. Just as they were about to arrive, the J-type Naboo starskiff received another transmission from Organa, redirecting them to his ship, as Yoda had failed to defeat Palpatine. Aboard the Alderaanian Senator's ship, Padmé gave birth to Luke and Leia, and demanded that the Jedi refrain from trying to kill Anakin, and orders them to bring her to him. Yoda shook his head, as Anakin had fallen to the dark side, and from that there was no return, and the Jedi would not risk the lives of the powerful Force sensitives in Luke and Leia. Padmé was forced to accept that all hope for the Galactic Republic had fallen, and she began to construct the foundations of a new rebel alliance, which she hoped would counter the Empire, after faking her death on her home planet of Naboo. In return, Luke and Leia are not split up as the Jedi had desired, but they use Organa's palace on Alderaan as their safe house to begin their training in the Jedi arts. Meanwhile, in the colonies region of the galaxy, the remainder of the Separatists descended on the planet of Cato Neimoidia, finding that the Republic was still battling the droid army. As the Separatists had been presumed to be missing, the puppet leader Viceroy Findos had been placed in charge, so the Neimoidia members go to collect a collection of valuables and artifacts, hoping they could use them as bargaining power in the Empire. But as soon as they tried to leave, they were hit by gunfire from a Republic gunship and tumbled into a canyon below. Those on Alderaan soon received word of the mysterious crash, and the Jedi wonder if Keldor Jedi Master Plo Koon was still alive, in spite of what they had felt in the Force. Although they had concerns over this being a trap for the survivors of Order 66, the Jedi felt that it was worth the risk, so Yoda travelled alone, Not knowing he was in a race to capture the Separatists, the Jedi Grand Master approached the fog-covered atmosphere, feeling that the battle between the Republic and the Separatists was still continuing, so he had to be careful of the clone troopers. The Jedi used the distraction of the droid tri-fighters to avoid the detection of the Republic gunships, and swooped into the ocean beneath the formation of rock arches, landing on a small pontoon. Leaving his ship in the capable hands of R2-D2, Yoda searched for any Force sensitives, but he could not find any as he approached the land. The Grand Master was about to turn around when he caught sight of a large plume of smoke rising in between a cluster of trees. Yoda cautiously ignited his blade and walked towards the target, keeping a close eye upon any patrolling clone troopers, then began to put out the flames with the Force. As the smoke finally cleared, he heard groans of pain, and to his surprise, he saw all of the members of the previously powerful Separatist alliance grouped together. The Jedi instinctively pulled them all out of the wreckage, ignoring the crimes they had committed during the war, and dragged them all to a nearby docking area, where R2-D2 was waiting. Yoda calmly escorts the captives into a dormant Republic cruiser, as R2 enters the small hangar, before he takes off for Alderaan again. The guise of the Republic ship helps to avoid all of the clones, and Yoda safely arrives back on Alderaan with his new passengers. As he lands, Bail Organa and Padmé Amidala are keen to examine the prisoners, and they take satisfaction in seeing their once powerful enemies reduced to nothing. The Alderaanian guards place them into the palace cells, and Obi-Wan goes to interrogate them one by one. None of the prisoners are in a position to negotiate, as their valuables have been destroyed in the crash, but Gunray still had the master control signal, which could serve as a defense mechanism for the rebels. Yoda, Obi-Wan, Bail and Padmé discuss how to best capitalize on these prisoners, and they decide that they could be useful allies if they could set aside all of their differences. Bail and Padmé are seated opposite the Neimoidian representatives of the former Separatist alliance, and they begin to negotiate a settlement to cooperate in defeating their mutual enemy. The rebels easily persuade the still frightened Separatists, sparing their lives in return for control over their droid army. The key planet that the new alliance had to secure was Geonosis, as the droid factories were still standing, so they ventured to investigate. Yoda and Obi-Wan are guided by Poggle the Lesser, as well as the Techno Union onto Geonosis, and with the aid of a group of battle droids, they defeat any of the station guards. Just as Poggle began to talk to the worker drones, they hear a large explosion above them. Through their macro binoculars, they spot the asteroid belt above the planet beginning to be decimated, and the lone shuttle landed on the rocky plains. The two Jedi Masters ignited their blades, and to Obi-Wan's horror, the former Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker emerged, now under the influence of Emperor Palpatine. Coldly gazing at the Jedi, he confidently wielded his lightsaber before going for his old master. Any droids daring to cross his path were swiftly converted into scrap, and his old master had trouble keeping up with his refined rage. The presence of Yoda eased his doubts, as the Grand Master concentrated on Vader, then hoisted him into the air. The Sith apprentice let out a burst of anger, but was restrained by Obi-Wan, who could not bring himself to kill his Padawan. Vader is placed in a nearby Force containment field, and the Jedi set about changing the brutal conditions of the droid factories. Leaving Vader to suffer on his own, the Jedi knew that the Emperor would soon notice his disappearance, and moved on to their next target, which was the retaken planet of Skako Minor, where the Techno Union had previously operated. The Politech species are confused by another change of leadership, but at the sight of Wat Tambor, they bowed, then guided him back to his headquarters. Unfortunately, the presence of the Empire blocked their path, and the first new wave of Imperials fired at the intruders, forcing the Jedi to defend Wat Tambor. The blaster rifles were no match for the lightsabers, and the Techno Union leader had his base back and began the development of concepts for new weaponry. The Jedi turned back to their ship and back to Alderaan, where Luke and Leia eagerly anticipated their arrival, until they saw another ship land just outside of the palace. The Jedi instinctively summoned their lightsabers in anticipation of an attack, but soon deactivated them, as they were surprised to see Clone Trooper Rex and former Jedi Padawan Ahsoka Tano. The two traitors of Palpatine's Galactic Republic had miraculously survived Order 66 with the help of the Zabrak Maul, and had found themselves a Y-wing starfighter to re-enter the galaxy. Finding the communication code to Senator Bail Organa, the Senator had been delighted to have more experienced warriors in his rebel alliance, and had ensured their passage to his planet. Now Bail Organa introduced them as new recruits to the Rebel Alliance, and beckoned them into the palace. A small mission centre had taken the place of one of the many rooms, and they soon received reports from one of their rebel cells that the Empire had found out about their skirmish on Geonosis. Ahsoka and Rex were horrified at the subtle entrance of the Neimoidian Separatists, and the Togruta ignited her blade, but Organa ordered for her to relinquish her grip, as they were now working together. The leader of the Alliance laid out the schematics of the droid factory, and despite reinforcing the area, they could not stop the might of the Empire's Star Destroyers. Yoda dispatches the two new recruits to fly alone, whilst the others try to ensure Vader would not escape, along with the droid army. The move was secretly employed by Yoda to avoid any confrontation between Vader and his former apprentice and clone trooper, but it was delaying the inevitable. Ahsoka and Rex trail the freighter piloted by Bail Organa, and they split up as soon as they see the enormous Imperial Star Destroyer looming over Geonosis. The former Jedi uses her mastery of flying to dodge through the heavy fire, as Rex fires at the turbo laser turrets, hitting several of them, but they are useless to resist the powerful tractor beam. They both prepare themselves for the inevitable battle, and they find that they had a battalion of droids at their disposal, so deploy them ahead of their landing. The shields of the destroyers absorb a lot of the blaster fire, and without immediate access to electro-proton bombs, the Imperial troopers allow Ahsoka and Rex to slip through and into the elevator. The duo ascended to the bridge, and to the Togruta's disgust, Tarkin is standing at the head of the ship, barking out orders to the officers, despite the alarms ringing all over. As they are about to attack, they are blocked by a group of stormtroopers, led by one of Vader's Inquisitors, and they are forced to back away. Force pushing Rex back into the turbolift, Ahsoka meditated on the cold floor and lifted the Inquisitor's lightsaber into the air, then perfectly twirled it to decapitate the line of stormtroopers and pointed the blade to the dark side user's throat. Slowly getting to his feet, he walks to the front of the ship, but before they could react, the Inquisitor depressurizes the cabin, sending himself out of the bridge and into space, but leaving the rebels struggling to hang on to the crumbling command center. The B-2 battle droids flew out, and Rex activated the magnetic floor, so they could use the feet of the BX series commando droids. Ahsoka is about to lose her grip, when they are rescued by a squadron of Geonosian starfighters, unleashed by Poggle the Lesser, and the rebels climb aboard, not before launching detonators into the core of the Star Destroyer. The Geonosians guide them to the surface below, where Obi-Wan and Yoda are struggling to deal with a number of Imperial troopers, despite their droid reinforcements, and the escaping rebels have to quickly join the fight. A small group of Imperial officers have been alerted to the location of Vader, and despite the pleas of Yoda, Ahsoka feels the Force calling to her in a small chamber, but to her shock, her former master had been unleashed. Vader pointed his lightsaber at Ahsoka, demanding to know the location of all the other Jedi, but she refused to bow to his request and instead threw a detonator into the room, and running back to Yoda, they completed their defense of the droid factories. The surviving droids guarded the entrance to the facilities from any further threats, as the rebels returned to the safety of the rebel base on Alderaan. But back on Geonosis, the collapsing cave had not stopped moving, as Vader raised an angered fist through the rocks and summoned a burst of force energy to destroy the debris on top of him. Staggering to his feet, he found the closest abandoned Imperial TIE fighter and flew to his Imperial Star Destroyer, greeting the hologram of his master Darth Sidious. The Sith Lord was displeased that he had been captured so easily, and ordered him to correct his mistake by eliminating the Separatist Alliance, which had been an annoyance for far too long. Vader would not hesitate. Vader was wary of being on the receiving end of his master's punishments, and decided he wanted immediate revenge on the opponents on Geonosis. The Sith apprentice knew not to underestimate the Geonosians this time around, and equipped himself with an elite group of Imperial troopers, whilst he dealt with Poggle. Palpatine wanted the Separatists alive, and as he landed by the secret hideout previously used by Dooku, the attack is a surprise, and Vader lifts the Geonosian into the air. Grasping his throat, he places him in the hands of the stormtroopers, then leaves the rest of his troops to deal with the area, knowing that the Jedi were nowhere near. The former Jedi Knight dragged Poggle onto the bridge and in front of the hologram of Sidious, then began to torture him for information on the Separatist operations. Poggle could not resist the power of the dark side and revealed almost everything, from his collaboration with the Rebel Alliance to the resurrection of the decommissioned droid army before he was thrown into a cell. From the planet of Alderaan, Yoda had been meditating in his quarters when he heard the long-lost voice of Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn again. The wise Jedi informed Yoda that they were in danger, and they spared no time in evacuating the planet just before a trifecta of Imperial Star Destroyers left hyperspace and cast a large and ominous shadow over the planet. Fortunately for the Rebel Alliance, the Separatists had placed tracking beacons on all of their leaders, and even though Poggles had been recently destroyed, the previous location pointed to the skies of Tatooine, conveniently close to Geonosis. The recent reports of the beginning of the construction of the Death Star had forced the rebels to emerge, as they did not have the resources to match the technological superweapon, so they gathered all of their starfighters, some still in the specifications of the Clone War era. Obi-Wan was well aware of the strategies of his former apprentice, and he knew that the strength of the rebels would be to attack the Empire by surprise. Deploying one of the older Venator-class Star Destroyers over Geonosis, the attention of the Empire is drawn towards it, and upon the command of those aboard, the main fleet leaves hyperspace and begins a major assault on the blind side of the Imperial fleet hovering above Tatooine. The initial surprise works for the rebels, as they manage to wipe out a portion of the fleet, but Vader's Devastator still remained a threat. The Jedi began to close in with one of their old Republic gunships, before tumbling into the hangar of the destroyer and finding the Sith apprentice in front of them again. Unlike their previous encounter, however, from behind Vader emerged Darth Sidious, looking at the rebels with disdain. Extending his fingertips, Sith magic coloured the entire area in a blue haze, and they all ducked for cover behind a group of cargo crates. Yoda led the counterattack as he deflected the magic using his hands, and Palpatine ignited his blades to cut through the rebel officers, then push Ahsoka and Obi-Wan into an Imperial fighter. Yoda is struggling against the two Sith, and hope for the light was fading into darkness, when from the chaotic aerial battle, a Naboo starskiff gracefully landed beside the remains of their gunship. The combatants stopped to watch who had dared to interrupt them, and it was the former Senator of Naboo, Padmé Amidala. Vader looked at his master with hate, as he had been continuously told that he had driven her to her death with his anger, but here she was, completely healthy. Palpatine was about to send Sith lightning at Padmé, but Vader stepped in between them to absorb the attack with his hand. Vader had seen through the lies of his master, and stalked towards Palpatine, who believed to the very end that he could not be defeated, but Vader reached for his lightsaber and sliced the head off of the Dark Lord of the Sith. Yoda went to assist the injured Rebel Force sensitives, whilst Padmé cautiously guided Vader into her ship and showed him their children, before returning to the Rebel fleet. A small freighter arrived to collect Yoda, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, and together they ensured that Vader was not shot to pieces by the rebels, and subsequently put on trial for his crimes. As the Empire began to crumble without their leadership, Vader avoided being sentenced to death due to the forgiving Jedi, but was placed under constant supervision. The territories no longer occupied by the Empire were divided in their control between the rebels and the Separatists, whom no longer had their initial ambitious plans, but were pleased to live their lives in comfort, as their allied rebels began the road to fixing the galaxy. That is it for What If the Separatists Joined the Rebels. If you enjoyed this What If, please like this video, turn on the notification bell, click that subscribe button on this channel for more What Ifs, as well as on my other channel What If Films. And as always, leave a comment on what if you'd all like to see next, and how I can improve my videos. Thank you all very much for watching, and see you next time.